Welcome to the Knowledge Gap. Join us as we uncover training challenges, explore learning culture, and envision the future of L&D. Brought to you by Realise, the knowledge platform built for L&D.
Hi, Juliette. Thank you so much for joining us. How are you?
Very well, thank you. How are you? Thank you very much for inviting me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm really good, thank you. So everyone listening, I'm joined here by Juliette Denny. Juliette, can you just introduce yourself to everyone and just tell us a little bit about what role you're in?
Yeah, sure. So my name is Juliette Denny, and I am the founder and managing director of a company called Growth Engineering. We have been around for 20 years, or we will have been around on March the 6th of next year, 20 years, so 19 and a bit years now. And we are a SaaS gamified social learning platform provider to large enterprise clients globally, people like L'Oreal, HP, Centrica, Procter and Gamble. So that is, so on a day-to-day basis, what do I sort of do? I get very involved in sales, product development, and consultancy. So we also do a lot of consultancy for people like Apple and Mandarin Oriental, trying to help them understand how they can move towards higher engagement on their learning technologies.
Yeah. Oh, great. Sounds really interesting. It's certainly not something you see or hear people talking about day to day. So you've been in the L&D industry for quite some time. How did you actually get into this space?
I think, like all good entrepreneurs, I started off in sales. I'm a big proponent that you can't really run a business, or you can't really, grow unless you are, willing to sort of get your hands dirty and get into the sales market. So when I came out of university, I pretty much went into software sales straight away. Then, I had a couple of my own businesses. Some of them were successes, some of them were failures. The one that I had maybe 5 years out of university was pretty successful, and so I decided I was going to do some traveling. While I was traveling, I met my then husband, and to cut a very long story short, we then went to, he got into Harvard Business School, and so he was doing an MBA there. And I started working for a software company outside Boston that was in the SaaS technology space. And having had tech businesses before, it's like, that is definitely what I want to start. I want to start a SaaS business. So it turned out that I did some courses and got my master's at Harvard as well. And then when we came back to the UK, I decided that I was going to set up a SaaS business. But of course, I'm not a coder and a salesperson. So I started selling sales consultancy to companies that were looking at investing in SaaS technology companies. But lots of those SaaS technology companies were run by technology people, not necessarily salespeople. And so the venture capital companies or the banks would basically contract me to go in, look at their pipeline, look at their sales structure, look at how they, what their go-to-market was, and make recommendations as to whether that company was going to meet its sales targets so that they put in another venture or not. And the practice was quite busy, and so I decided that we were going to code up a audit tool. So we coded up an audit tool, which then morphed into a learning management platform. And once we started moving away from process audits and into skills audits, then we started developing a lot of content, and the people that we were trying to engage is obviously salespeople, sales leaders, managing directors. And so from the very kind of get-go of Growth Engineering, it was very clear that our focus was not on kind of revolutionizing the L&D industry with regards to new technology. That was a given, right? I mean, technology was coming and learning was going to move online. our real interest has always been, how do you engage? How do you create learning curiosity within an organization, and for individuals? So yeah, I never started off thinking I was going to get into L&D, but I have to say I absolutely love it. It's a challenge that just never seems to go away. How do you engage people? How do you make people curious about, the products and services that they're interacting with, that they're selling, that they're servicing, and how do you get them to really invest in, their own career? So yeah, a bit of an introduction.
No, brilliant. No, it's really interesting to see how the pieces of the journey have come together to lead you into content and L&D. So at the very start of your career then, I imagine there was a lot of off-the-shelf LMS content that perhaps maybe existed when they were kind of new, like you said, learning technologies was kind of at its starting point then, weren't it? And one of the challenges that you noticed was actually getting people to engage with the learning itself. What was it about the what existed already that made you think, I think we can do better than this? Or no wonder people aren't perhaps maybe engaged?
Well, I mean, I think it was just, experience. So, when we, first started the platform, we were basically doing kind of personalized audits on, processes, and then, individuals on skills. And then we were essentially delivering kind of PowerPoint presentations or interactive kind of PowerPoints. But, immediately we sort of noticed that people wanted a human touch. So although the information was available online, they still wanted face-to-face workshops. They still wanted kind of individual, coaching and stuff like that. And so that was when we realized, well, look, we're not going to be able to scale like this. So the only way we're going to be able to scale is by putting gamification and social into the programs, in order to get people to want to continue, exploring these kind of subject areas. So, I mean, it was pretty immediate. And I guess also there was a sort of tacit understanding from myself and, Simon Blackburn, who also started the company with me, because we're both from a sales background. It was also a tacit understanding that we wouldn't really be interested in that. So if we were, the market that we were selling into, which we were, we knew that we had to do something, a bit different. And so that was really kind of the birth of really doubling down on gamification and doubling down on social learning, both of those things. And we are still fighting the good fight until today. I mean, time might have moved on, but the way people learn has stays the same,
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it, when you say about, the need for technology and a revolution to happen, because, we're using tech day to day. So learning through technology is just a given, isn't it? But it's interesting that there's still very much a focus and a need for a human touch within that, like you say. And I know you've mentioned around like gamification and like the social side of it. What would you say are some of the really key components that make a compelling learning course? Have you got some examples?
Well, I mean, I think there's lots of things. I mean, the way the human brain works is that, we have got a very sort of kind of limbic brain. The vast majority of why we do things is not necessarily at the higher edges of cognitive, ability, or, there's not a really deep understanding. Most of the motivations that pass through our brains are driven by kind of emotional responses to things. So, I always think the start point is personalization. So a lot of compliance is all about, well, you need to do this because the company needs you to do it. Okay. Now that is absolutely a valid thing for companies to want to happen, but it's not a valid thing in the mind of the individual that is receiving compliance training. So the way the individual sees that is it's mandatory training, and it may or may not be relevant to me and my role, and it may not be relevant to you personally. And actually, do I care? So first step, I think, is to to have some sort of training needs analysis. So to break down the unit into, or to break down the chunk into small bite-sized elements, and asking the learner, hey, do you know this? Have you got experience of this? Is it something that, you know, is it something that, you know, means something to you? How would you respond to this question? And so what you're delivering to them is not a templatized set of learning based on the organizational requirements, but more, you know, do they already know some of the elements? And if they do, they don't have to do the learning, but they have to do the elements that are going to allow them to pass. So I'd say, first of all, personalization is absolutely critical. The second thing I would say is interactivity is also critical, because as we know, the human brain, most human brains, some people might be different, but let's just say most human brains are capable of receiving one-way information for an extended period of time. So as we know, if we're in the pub and we're having a drink and we sidle up to somebody and they start monologuing at us, very quickly we switch off, right? We're just not interested. Okay. And the same thing is within a learning environment. So there needs to be an element of, yes, I'm pushing this information, but after a very short period of time, there needs to be some sort of interactivity. Okay. Now, in the past, we've heavily relied on the idea of quizzes, which is binary. Okay. What we have seen in the learning technologies industry is a huge move, rightly so, towards social learning. So what makes people curious is not, yes, I'm satisfied that I've actually passed that quiz question, although from a kind of cognitive point of view, you do need to go through that leap. So you need to go, am I doing this for a reason that I understand? Yes. Have I understood the knowledge? Yes. Have I been tested, and am I now confident in that knowledge? Yes. Now, the bit that really interests the human mind is, how do I apply it? Right. That's when the natural curiosity kicks in. So it's like, oh, so I've just learned about this. Now, what questions should, you know, the instructor ask me in order to show how I can apply it? That's when I light out. That's when the brain light up and go, wow, this is finally interesting, because I'm allowed to actually talk and discuss about how I'm going to put this information into practice. And so that's when social learning really comes into play. And then, of course, finally, if you are going to show how you put learning into practice in your role, what better way to satisfy the idea that you're going to come back into that environment than being rewarded for it? So you gamify the experience to say, wow, you know, not only did I learn it, I passed the test, I showed how I was going to use the learning, and now I'm being rewarded for my input to the learning community and the development of further, you know, knowledge resources in order to, you know, drive the organization forward. And that's really, that's what we try and do with our platform and our content and the way we structure learning in order to create that kind of real curiosity and passion for learning within the organization.
It's interesting. I'm immediately applying myself to all of this when I think about, because you mentioned compliance courses, and you know that when you think of online compliance course, it almost gives you like the fear of doom, like, oh my gosh, clicking through everything straight to get to the test at the end, like that. I'm a classic person that's guilty of that, when we used to have to do them manually in my old roles. And you're so right, again, with the personalization side of it, you know, where it's a mandatory course, like, you know, something related to compliance or something process related that might be specific to your role. If this is something that's repeated time and time again and it isn't engaging, people are just going to switch off, get to a point where there is some interaction and just give it a go and try the best. How digitally, what are some examples of ways that you can recreate that social element of it? So the bit where we're looking at, okay, how do I apply this to my role? How can we recreate those interactions in a digital aspect?
Yes, I mean, what we encourage our clients to do is curate campaign learning. So for us, campaign learning has, you know, some set stages. So, you know, in any one year, they would sit down and they would look at their sort of strategic learning plan for the organization, and they would say, right, The first element is to focus on personalization. Okay.
Yeah.
So how are we going to ensure that the right people get the right content in order to not waste people's time? Okay. Because in L&D, the last thing we want is a trailing kind of reputation of, yeah, L&D come in, they do compliance training, it's a total waste of time. And I'm sure we've all heard that before. No, we're going to personalize and we're going to tailor the learning experience to what that individual knows. Okay.
Yeah.
And if that means they have to pass a test in order to not do the training, well, that's absolutely fine. So first of all, we're going to do the personalization aspect of it. Then we're going to deliver the content. Then we're going to test them so that we know, that they have learned it. And that's a quantitative experience. It can be multiple choice. It can be anything you want, but it's a quantitative experience. Then they are sure that they are confident enough to go into what we call sort of social challenges, right? So when they're doing the social challenges are all in and around the learning. So it's about saying, you've now learned this. Tell me about your experience in store. You had this experience. How would you identify And then basically what you have is you have a social environment. So on our platforms we have clubs, social clubs that can be created in around certain learning. And then obviously you can get ranked and rated for your answers. You can get additional sort of gamified elements. And the more you participate in the social environment, showing how you're applying the knowledge and taking the knowledge to a new area, the more you get rewarded, the more you get, the more XP you get, etc. And then, we've seen all sorts of interesting things, like those subject matter experts can then have their own social environment. So they become, learning leaders within the organization to give them kudos. But that sort of process is really critical. The other thing that I should sort of slightly cycle back on is the quantitative testing element. We have really gamified that. So we have what's called peer-to-peer battles and battle squads. So, although you're being asked quantitative questions, you're doing so in a kind of competitive environment. So, 5 short, sharp questions a day, or, able to, throw out a battle challenge to, another learner. And from that, that's obviously a much more exciting way to reinforce your knowledge and test your knowledge than, a piece of compliance, learning. So the kind of environments that we try and create are ones that fall naturally in line with the way people are. So the brain works. And obviously, if you lean in to the natural way that humans learn and get curious, you are more likely to have and make real impact in learning, because you're falling forward. You're not trying to make people do stuff they just fundamentally don't want. I mean, it was interesting when you were talking about your experience in compliance. This is 99% of people's experience. It's like, I would prefer to stick a sharp pencil in my eye than do compliance. Do it. And so we need to sort of reformat that in a way that, basically allows them to do the types of learning that the companies require, but in a manner and in a way that falls more naturally as to the way the human brain works and is motivated to do things.
Yeah, definitely. And as you've been talking, it's just made me think about, I guess, the way that we are interacting and learning personally, not just in working day-to-day life as well. And I think we're heavily relying on social platforms out of work for a lot of things, how aren't we? Social media is huge. Everyone's glued to the phone, probably more so like younger generation, like Gen Z coming into the workplace. Have you noticed any different specific needs or requirements that are suited to, a modern learner who doesn't know anything other than the internet and perhaps hasn't had a lot of face-to-face training experience like some other people in corporate organizations might have, people fresh out from uni, apprentices coming into the world of work. Have you noticed the need for anything different tailored to that audience?
I mean, what we've seen kind of wholesale is the democratization of learning. So, going back to, even with sort of Aristotle and, the very first kind of learning experiences, these were very kind of like, I'm going to say something, you're going to listen to me, and then we might have a discussion about it. That was Aristotle. But, if you think about the typical classroom, there would be a lot of like the teacher standing in front of the audience and then basically projecting, and then there might be some opportunity to discuss. The modern learner doesn't really like that for an extended amount of time, so they're quite happy to do that for, let's say, 2 to 3 minutes, but they're not happy to do that for an hour and a half, or even half an hour. What they want is they want to be able to ask questions and interact with that knowledge, and sort of be able to sort of apply that knowledge to things that they're doing. So we are seeing a couple of things happen. First of all, we're seeing this idea of democratization of learning. So everybody wants a voice. Okay, not everybody will say something, but everybody wants to know that if they do want to say something, they do have a voice. And I think that's directly because of social media. The other thing that we've been seeing is that large pieces of e-learning are no longer effective, and they're no longer effective for a couple of reasons. First of all, they're not effective because people don't like them. Most people's day is perpetually peppered by interruptions and things like that, so people are really struggling to sit down and concentrate for long periods of time. So it suits their lifestyle to have short, sharp bursts. It also taps into this idea of progress. People love to think that they've achieved something. So 2 minutes is more satisfying for the brain, or 10 2-minute pieces of content are much more satisfying for the brain than one large piece. And the final absolutely massive piece is the move to mobile. So not only are we seeing people constantly on the move, so whether they're working from home or the office, they've got the devices in their hand, but they're not necessarily sitting at a computer doing learning. And so what they're actually learning on is vastly more on the mobile phone than it is on the web, and that's even more so outside the UK. So if we look at, let's say, a typical Indian audience, or a typical audience in Peru, or a typical audience, whilst in the UK and the US, we're still seeing, let's say 30-40% of people learning on the web. In other countries, it is vastly dominated by mobile learners. And so
that's interesting.
So if you are not, if you haven't got a mobile first strategy and your content isn't mobile first, you'll just see a dip in engagement, basically.
That is really interesting. And I must admit, as a consumer of learning, I haven't had much experience of mobile learning. Most of the things in most recent years I've learned have been face-to-face or through, I feel bad that e-learning gets such a bad reputation, but they have been boring, lengthy e-learning pieces of content. And one thing that I've noticed recently when I've been a learner in classroom environments, whether that be face-to-face or whether that be like through Zoom, my attention span, it's next to nothing. If I'm not being asked a question, if I'm not in a group activity, or I'm not directly engaged thinking, how does this link to me? How can I apply it? Like you're saying, I do find it really hard to engage. And it makes me think, I wonder whether the fact that, social media and quick content that we're consuming day to day has a massive influence over that, coupled with, like you say, the fact that the brain just processes information better. But it's something that I'm very conscious of, especially when I'm delivering training, that it makes me think, how would I feel if I was sat in their position? I hope to God they're not thinking how I feel sat in these settings sometimes. But the need to break things up into bite-sized format is evident that it's an absolute must, isn't it, nowadays?
Yeah, and I think also the other thing is you can see that really in the classroom. I mean, I find it really interesting what's happening in you know, the sort of formal education sector of learning, because not only are we dealing with, you know, a rise of people that have kind of short attention spans, and so, you know, we're choosing to go down a kind of medicalized route. I think there are bigger questions to ask about, you know, how the brain works and how the brain operates. So,
Yeah.
you know, how people like learning is this: they like it in short bursts. They like to be interactive, but also they also like to be mobile. So, you look at, you know, a typical child in a classroom setting, and you ask them to sit down quietly and learn. From the very get-go, you're asking a lot of children to do something that is not active. You know, I mean, I have two boys, you know, and I myself as a student, you know, dyslexic, and have the need to, you know, be active while I'm actually learning. And I think, you know, when we look forward into the kind of future of education, there are some really exciting possibilities that will allow every type of learner to really kind of learn in the way they want to learn. And I would say that there's a huge opportunity, you know, with future technology, for people to get individualized and personalized learning that really satisfies their innate curiosity. So, you know, we're born curious. We are born wanting to learn. It really is, you know, the process of going through school and then the process of having, you know, boring e-learning that basically kills our desire to, you know, to invest in our own learning. And that is wrong, you know. It's not the fact that people don't want to learn. That's absolutely not true. I mean, the human brain requires, for our you know, our enthusiasm and excitement for life, it requires new information. It requires, you know, us to be curious. You know, that is one of the biggest things that, you know, stops the aging process. Are you curious about, you know, what will happen in your garden, a new language, traveling, whatever?
Note to self, be more curious.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, you know, and it's the same with classroom training. You know, kids, there's no such thing as sort of bad kids or kids that can't learn. You know, we need to amend how we are delivering that learning to them in order to provide the kind of learning environment that's going to, you know, bring out that innate curiosity in them.
No, you're right. It's, you know, the traditional education model has existed in the same format pretty much for what, hundreds of years, hasn't it? And I think now we are more aware of, you know, the need for individual learning, neurodiversity, and all of that plays a huge part in it as well. It's definitely bringing to the forefront of the mind the need for personalization and things to be just switched up. And that actually mobile learning or mobile interaction is not a bad thing, is it?
No.
And I've heard, you know, even people in my family that are of an older generation talking about, you know, kids within our family, oh, they've always got a device on their hand, they're glued to their iPad, why don't they go and play outside anymore? And you think, well, it's, you know, it's completely different times now, but how much information is actually being absorbed and learned through doing that? You know, I've got you know, a great nephew, which makes me sound really old, that is really competent using an iPad more so than some of the older, you know, generation in my family, and has been able to pick things up independently from having free reins to have a play around. And I think it kind of links back to what you're saying, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's one of those things that I think the best way to get people to change, or do something you want them to do, is to lean into their natural tendencies. And one of the things that I find fascinating about a lot of the things that, you know, humans try to get other humans to do is that they're like, well, I think, you know, you should, you know, you should do it, or we should do it this way. ignoring the natural way in which the brain is motivated.
Yeah.
And so automatically it's going to be more difficult than it needs to be. And I think a really good example of that is change management. So
Yeah.
if you say to somebody, okay, we're going to launch a new platform, or we're going to do this new initiative, then the brain's natural tendency for the majority of people is to say no, because people don't like change. You know, they don't like sweeping new things. That what they like is they like to be included in the conversation about change. Then they like to make sure that they've got everything around them to manage that change. And then they need to, you know, participate in the change, be rewarded for that change. And then they need to be part of, you know, evolving that change into, you know, the next big kind of project. And so, but that's not really the way, you know, change management works. The way change management works is you get a select few of people who come along and say, right, you're going to do this. And then obviously the organization pushes back against that. And I think we're not really taught enough about, you know, how to influence, you know, organizational behavior in a way that correlates and maps onto, you know, the way human beings intrinsically work. And I find that endlessly fascinating. Like things are so much harder than they actually need to be, in my view. Because we don't spend enough time thinking about, you know, the way, I don't know, leaning into what people want to do. I mean, the experience that you know, young people have when they are on their iPad is one of autonomy. Yeah. So what they're feeling is, I have a device and I'm in control of anything that I view. And that feeling of autonomy gives us huge amount of confidence and relaxation, or not necessarily relaxation, but certainly confidence, because I can move wherever I, you know, I've got control over my time. So yeah, I mean, I think these things are very interesting. It's a very interesting world. And you know, when we think about the role that AI can play in the future of education, I think that is, you know, is going to be incredible. I hope that it will completely revolutionize the way, you know, our children learn, so that they learn faster and more efficiently. And, you know, so many people aren't locked out of formal education, because I think a lot of people, you know, are, you know, as you pointed to.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that it's at a very interesting phase at the moment with the introduction to AI and learning and in corporate organizations. And I'm quite excited to see, I guess, what happens in terms of the benefits that we can use and really utilizing the tools properly, like you say. So I've just got one final question then for you, Juliette. I'm just thinking about anyone that could be listening to this that's thinking, oh gosh, our relearning's 1 hour long. There's a test at the end of it. I don't have big budgets, or perhaps maybe limited technology constraints. What's maybe just a piece of advice that you would give to anyone listening to this as a place to start for trying to just give their content a bit of a glow up, to make it a little bit more interactive, but maybe just doesn't have free reins to change everything?
Yeah, I mean, I would say one of the key things is have a look at gamification, have a look at the elements of gamification. So gamification is not turning learning into a game, it's utilizing gaming mechanics, things like you know, badges, leaderboards, you know, levels, these types of things, to make the learning more compelling, you know, because you know, users like to be rewarded, they like to see progression, they like to have an element of competition. And it won't be all of your users, but it'll be the vast majority. And so understanding gaming mechanics might just give some creative ideas to you and your team with regards to how you can change, you know, a piece of e-learning into something that's more, you know, something that's more engaging, you know, and you know, our sort of a triangle of awesomeness, you know, that we try to get our clients to focus on is this idea of gamification, social, and what we call epic meaning. So epic meaning is trying to get the reason why Like, why should I do this? Really clear in the mind of the user. And if you've got that sort of golden triangle of user experience, you will find that it's a lot easier to get 100% completion. If people really clearly understand why they're doing it, what's in it for them, if there's a social element to the learning and they can prove that, you know, they are applying the learning, and that you're using gaming mechanics to show progress, collaboration, competition, etc., that's really where we see massive high impact. So yeah, I think that would be the format that I would encourage people to think about.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I've really enjoyed speaking to you. You've been an absolutely fantastic guest, and I'm sure that there's just so much great information that people will be able to take away from this. So yeah, thank you so much. It's
a pleasure. Thank you very much for inviting me. I enjoyed speaking to you. Take care.
Oh, no problem. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
If you've enjoyed listening, like and subscribe for the latest episodes. Head to the website to create your free account or to learn more about Realise, the AI knowledge platform built for L&D.